One rule's peculiarity specific to Pathfinder is tiny PCs. These are generally not allowed in most editions of D&D or in many related games because of complexities related to size, particularly when there are rules in place for it. Pathfinder 2e has a specific set of rules to enable this, and today I'm going to explain a couple of those rules. My name is Sidewin, and let's get started here. So this is the Archives of Nethys page for the sprite ancestry. In general, this is the most common tiny ancestry you will see in the game. However, awakened animals and puppets can also be tiny, depending on what is selected. The general rules of tiny PCs is they function very similarly to monsters. This is the special rules page here, with the flying PCs, riding PCs, and tiny PCs rules. So for tiny specifically, a tiny PC does not actually fill a full 5x5 square, unlike a small or medium PC. They can enter the space of another creature, which is important, quote here, because their melee strikes typically have no reach. The way this rule works is generally to attack an enemy in melee, a sprite has to enter their square. So if you're fighting zombies, then the sprite has to go under their feet to stab them. There is one way that you can change the rules back to a more typical one, which is reach weapons. With reach weapons, they have reach of 5 feet, allowing them to attack adjacent squares. So there is that disadvantage of you having to go right up against the creature to be able to affect them. And they can attack you in that location, so it can be somewhat dangerous. But if you can get behind another creature, then you can take cover. Basically, the advantage here is with the take cover action, you can gain a +4 circumstance bonus to AC against the other creatures by ducking behind either your ally or an enemy. This does make it so that, in general, tiny PCs are not the best for playing tank characters, however much people joke about it, because no one else can take cover behind them, and they also technically can't fill a whole square. If you're using a mount, for instance, if you have a sprite champion and take the mount feat, then some GMs may allow you to have a small size mount and thus fill the entire square, allowing you to function as a tank. But you are somewhat chained to that mount and cannot act on your own. Another set of rules mentioned about tiny PCs on this page is riding PCs. In general, the system discourages this action, because if you are riding on another PC, you and that other PC have to sacrifice an action to allow this. The only time where that is somewhat important could be for long-distance travel, because sprite PCs have a movement speed of 20 feet as opposed to the typical 25 feet, which over time can add up to a slower pace. And the assumption is 20 feet is your all-out run, and the rules typically do not allow for you to travel at the full speed for the entire time you're moving. Thus, again, you have less movement range, and that's the only time you would really want to ride on another PC. That's the majority of the rules of tiny PCs, aside from the various workarounds with mounts, which bring in the mount rules, and those vary depending on how you have your companion. It's usually an animal companion. For instance, if you go here into the animal companions rules, then you can see a set of animal companions, and there's a set number of statistics which can be found by searching for the specific stat block. For instance, here, young animal companions, it goes here, and your companion's level is equal to your own. The proficiencies are set, and the hit points is also set based off what type of companion it is. But this can make it somewhat more complex than simply playing a small or medium-sized PC. In general, if you want to play a melee character and not deal with rules which require you to go underneath the other PC, my recommendation is that you play a small PC. And in fact, all of those tiny ancestries have rules to enable this. So if I go back here to the sprite ancestry, it's down here under rare, meaning your GM might not allow it. Then you can go to sprite heritages and see the pixie ancestry. And part of the pixie is that instead of being tiny, your size is small, allowing the sprite to function just like any other ancestry. Similarly, for puppets, you can have the almost any puppet really. There's only one that's tiny. And thus you can just play any of those other ones, and you don't have to be tiny. An awakened animal also has a trick for this. You can be tiny, but it explicitly mentions that many animals have giant-sized versions of themselves, allowing a workaround for not being a tiny character. For instance, it mentions awakened giant bees or giant dogs. With these rules, you can avoid the tiny rules if you want to. But if you're playing a tiny PC, it's generally recommended that you fully understand your movement restrictions and how you have to be in the same square as someone else to attack them in melee. You should also read up on the cover rules, which can somewhat vary depending on your class and other situational aspects. But that is all the rules important for playing a tiny PC. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped.